Where is Good afternoon, fellow Guyanese. Let me spend some time today in explaining in very simple terms the Natural Resource Fund Bill, what is contemplated in the bill, how the bill enhances transparency and accountability, but more importantly, how would the bill work in actual fact. This bill is not just a bill that is a piece of paper. It is a bill that has to work in reality. It is a bill that has to fit in the national development priority and framework for the country. It has to fit in the macroeconomic framework of the country. And one do not need to second guess what are some of the fundamental elements of that development strategy or that macroeconomic framework that I'm speaking of. During the campaign, I elaborated very extensively what the agenda of the government will be and how the resources that Guyana or the revenue that Guyana accumulate will be used in achieving those targets and achieving the macroeconomic transformation and the holistic transformation of our country and people. So I have demonstrated that very clearly during the campaign. And it is in those elections that the people of Guyana reposed in the government the confidence to implement that agenda that sought to create and has already started the journey of creating 50,000 jobs, 50,000 new house lots, giving our people greater access to disposable income. And I'll get into some of what the agenda is. But first, I want to put a few questions before us and to address those questions, and then I would address some of the other issues. Now, why is there a need for a new natural resource fund bill? Why is it necessary? Why was it necessary for us to do this? Let me start by saying this. This was a campaign promise. It was a campaign promise that we are going to have an amendment of this bill for a number of reasons. One, the old bill is unconstitutional and illegitimate. We seem to forget that this bill was passed by the Parliament in January 2019, after the no confidence motion had been approved. So the bill has no legitimacy. The bill has no legitimacy. It was passed in Parliament after the no confidence. So it's unconstitutional. That is the first thing. The second issue is that the act was passed without any input or involvement by the then parliamentary opposition, who were not present in the National Assembly when the act was passed. And we were not present because the National Assembly ceased to exist. The government ceased to exist because a no confidence motion was passed. The Natural Resource Fund Act also had a number of fatal flaws in its content, which we had to rectify before the act could have been made operational. Now, what are these fatal flaws that the act had inside? The governance structure. Let us start with the governance structure. It was severely deficient, with no governing body, such as a board of directors. The Santiago Principles require a governing body. So let's start from there. There was no governing body, as is required by the Santiago Principles. If you have a company, the company has a board of directors. That board of directors govern the operation. The absence of a board of directors in the old act is compounded by the excessive power, roles, and responsibilities that was vested in one individual, the Minister of Finance. So not only did they not have a board, they vested all the power that would have been in a board to one individual, the Minister of Finance. So we sought to remove that in a new act, and I'll get to that. Further, they prepared the investment mandate which will guide the investment of the fund. That is what the government, the governing body has to do. Help in the preparation of the mandate that would guide the investment of the fund. So, the old act did not allow for any of this. For a matter of fact, it was the sole authoritative authority of the Minister of Finance doing all of this, determining the fiscal sustainable amount, determining the economic sustainable amount that was in his opinion. That was in his opinion the best possible framework or scenario for Guyana. So when we talk about the powers that existed in the old act, we have to speak about the powers that was vested in a singular individual, the Minister of Finance. So what we sought to do was to remove the extraordinary powers that was vested in the Minister of Finance by addressing these flaws. So the new bill drastically reduces the powers, functions, and responsibilities of the minister. It introduces a board of directors and grant the board almost all of the powers previously vested in the Minister of Finance. That board will include the private sector participation, as well as participation by a nominee of the National Assembly. So the new act removed the powers from this sole individual, the Minister of Finance. And this was a core argument that we presented when we opposed the old bill. And that power responsibility is now vested in a board of directors, removed from the minister, now vested in a board of directors that is comprised of a multifaceted set of Guyanese that will bring different skill sets, including labor, private sector, and nominee from the parliament. Further, it simplifies and strengthens the transparency of the formula for making withdrawals from the fund. Every single Guyanese will be able to understand what the formula is. They'll be able to do their own calculation. So as things progress, you will know exactly how much should be saved, or how much would be saved, how much would be invested, and how the fund will be utilized. A very simple formula. It explicitly requires the Minister of Finance to publish to the Gazette information on all receipts and a fund within 3 months, and table this information in the National Assembly subsequently. So this whole thing about, we won't know where the revenue is going, unlike what took place under the previous government, remember the 18 million US signing bonus, the Minister of Finance now has to publish in the Gazette within 3 months all revenue, all receipts, all revenue, all receipts that comes into the fund. Every single cent of revenue that comes into the fund has to be published. But much more than this, he then has to table that in the National Assembly. So the entire Parliament, which includes all members of the opposition, the media, the government, would be there. Because it has to now be tabled in the National Assembly. And if he does not do this, what will be the consequence? The consequence will be 3 to 10 years imprisonment. So not only are we setting out the principles, enhancing transparency, but we are willing to put the harshest of penalties because we do not intend to keep any information in relation to the management of the Natural Resource Fund away from the public. We intend to ensure that the public is kept abreast and part of the information set. That is why we're confident enough to put it in our manifesto and put it in the bill itself now. We are not running away. We are enhancing transparency by holding ourselves accountable, by holding the Minister of Finance accountable. Then let's move on to some other key questions. On the expenditure side, so let me just address a few more issues on the accountability side. So, outside of the Board of Directors and the Oversight Committee, what are the other features of accountability? Now, let me be very clear. If the budget is $300 billion, that budget has to be approved by Parliament. When that budget is approved by Parliament, the government has to implement that budget. That is the existing framework. The parliamentary opposition can question anything in that budget as part of the budget process. So similarly, any project to be financed from the fund will be part of parliamentary approval. Those projects will be approved by the Parliament. And every stakeholder, all the members of Parliament, will have an opportunity to debate and ask questions again. So when you're talking about the use of funds, it does not move away from the existing framework as in the budget itself. Then, so it will be subject to parliamentary oversight because the projects which will form part of the expenditure will be approved. Secondly, all these projects that will be financed will be subject to audits by the Auditor General. Just like every single project in the budget now is subject to Auditor General's audit. And then what happens with the Auditor General audit? The Auditor General audit then goes to the PSC. That is the existing framework. Every single project that is financed is audited, and then so another level. A standing parliamentary committee now, the PSC, the Public Accounts Committee. So you have post-approval debate, you have approval, you have audit, and then you have the PSC examining the Auditor General report. So that covers, again, added layer of accountability and transparency. And what is it we're going to spend this money on? It is not as if this government and Guyanese, you have my commitment. It is not as if we are unaware as to what will form the core set of expenditure, as if we are unaware as to what is the development agenda of the country. I made it very clear that, one, we have to accelerate our infrastructure transformation. Better roads, better drains, better facilities, better recreational facilities, greater lighting, greater support for security services. So, our accelerated infrastructure transformation. We have already laid out what those transformative projects are at the national level, at the regional level, and at the community level. Secondly, I've spoken time and again on our future not resting only on oil and gas. I've spoken extensively about the diversification and support to make non-oil sector competitive. So this is the second area. Investment in the traditional sectors of our economy, strengthening those sectors, agriculture, for example, supporting the diversification, expanding the economy, and making those sectors, tourism, agriculture, the services sector, more competitive, investing in it to make us world-class. That is the second core area of support. We then promise world-class health and educational services. And we did this in the manifesto, and the people elected us based on that manifesto. So this is a third area that you will see massive investment, transformation of our healthcare system and educational system, so our people can have access to the best possible healthcare and education. To support this, we are also going to invest heavily in our human capital. Investing in our human capital to transform our human capital, to equip them to function at the highest level and to be able to participate in the new shift in our economy. The fourth area, support to innovative and new areas of structural economic transformation. What is this? We know that we have spoken about this, that we want to bring down the cost of energy by 50%. We have spoken about the type of investment that we have to invest, that we'll have to make this happen. That will lead to an expansion of manufacturing, to an expansion of industrial development, agro-processing, transportation and logistics, the new sectors, ICT. So we are going to invest to support innovation and new areas of structural economic transformation. New areas, new sectors, creating the framework and incentive to drive private sector investment to create new areas of wealth, new areas of job. This is what is going to lead to a sustainable development of our country. I've spoken also about our accelerated housing program. When many doubted the achievement of 50,000 new house lots, we are well on our course to achieving that, but it requires investment. And it is a promise I made from day one that must be fulfilled and will be fulfilled. This is the type of investment we are making. Investment that will change our country, change the prospects for our people. So it is not a big guess as to what the expenditure, the areas the expenditure would be in. We've laid out this in a very comprehensive way. The investment would have to be made, an expenditure would have to be made to ensure the promise of 50,000 jobs is realized. So investment will also be made in job creation. Another key and important area. So I've addressed issues of accountability, transparency. I've addressed issues of the type of expenditure, how the expenditure will be made, the role of Parliament, the role of the opposition. The opposition is in Parliament. The opposition is not someone sitting down in the PNC head office. That is the leader of the PNC. That's a political party. The opposition is in Parliament. We can't have two opposition. They have to decide whether they want to make changes on who is the real opposition. But for me, constitutionally, the opposition is in Parliament. And I've defined the role of the opposition in Parliament. I am not going to work or allow the development trajectory of our country to be derailed. I've said it many times. I have a positive outlook and campaign on a manifesto that must be delivered to the people. Because as president and as a government, we have a moral responsibility to ensure that manifesto is implemented. Because we entered into a binding contract with the people when we presented that manifesto and asked them to support us. And they did. That is why we're in government. They have given us the mandate to implement the manifesto. There is no guessing. It is clear as light. Then, the other issue about the board of directors. The president would not just wake up and collect a few men and put them, and women and put them on a board and say this is the board of directors. The bill make it very clear. The minimum qualifications of board members are stipulated in the law. The minimum qualifications of board members are stipulated in the law. And the membership of the board is required to be published in the Gazette. So the composition of the board will be publicly known. And I want to assure Guyanese that in keeping with the law, the board will be the board of directors will be something we'll be proud of. So the board has to be appointed. The shareholders in this country are the electorate. The electorate elect the government, elected the president. So who should appoint this board? Who should appoint the board? The government was elected. I was elected as president by the shareholders, the citizens of this country. Are you saying that those persons who appointed the government through their vote did not repose the confidence in them? I am saying to every single Guyanese that you will be proud of the board. The board has to be appointed. But we cannot be critical of a board that does not even exist as yet. And we can't say anybody will be appointed on the board. The bill, the law sets out the minimum. The minimum qualification is required. We can't say the opposition is not involved. There will be a parliamentary nominee. But more than that, Everything that is done, every expenditure, the entire parliamentary opposition will be able to scrutinize and ask questions. Then the Auditor General, then the PAC. And there is no second guessing as to what type of expenditure will be made. This is not a president and a government who would take the money to go and buy 5 Rolls-Royce in the presidential fleet. We have outlined very clearly the type of expenditure. People-centered, people-oriented, to add disposable income in people's pocket, to give them the best possible social services, to enhance their livelihood, to improve their life, to change the image of Guyana, and to transform our country. So my fellow Guyanese brothers and sisters, it was necessary, even before the debate, that I took this opportunity to speak a bit about the Natural Resource Fund Bill. So, as the bill makes its way through the debates, there again, we are not an unconstitutional government that is rushing a bill through. The bill is in Parliament for a full debate. A full debate. So as we move forward, I want to assure you that the Natural Resource Fund will be managed in the interests of every Guyanese and the interests of all of Guyana. I thank you, God bless you, and continue to be safe.